I'm happy to move the report if there's a seconder, and then we'll open it up for questions. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. I've got Councillor Simpson first and Councillor Filipaina.
I think this is fantastic. It's really great. Local boards have obviously strong interest in community facilities because they hold the decision making and the budget for partnership around that. I was just interested to see how you got on presenting information in December 2017 to people.
Apologies, I noted that actually while preparing for this meeting. Yes, it should say December 2016.
I just think so. But the report being circulated to all local boards, was it discussed yesterday at the local boards forum, do you know?
No, it was not. However, there was Alison Dobby who was there to speak about a co-located facilities project, and I understand that she will have mentioned to members that we are coming. Right. Once we have endorsement from this committee, we'll go to the next available chairs forum to discuss the work and talk about.
That was my sort of question around process, Madam Chair. So we're approving it here and it goes to local boards. I thought because they had the decision making and budget for partnership facilities, it would have gone to them and then to us. No?
They were involved in.
We could probably both have a crack at this, but this is one of those difficult areas. I think Councillor Simpson, the pointy end does end up with us, and although boards have the budget, we still allocate the kind of the macro budget to how we're going to put into this, and we need, from a governance perspective, to actually work out how, on the sliding scale, we look at funding partnerships, we fund community facilities, and how much money we're actually going to tip into this, and how far we want to go down the partnership continuum. What's in my head around this is that we will carry on in a partnership model with our local boards, but in the first instance, as with much of this, which I know irritates the local boards, we still make the governance decision. We set the policy, we set the big budget, and then it goes to local boards. But my understanding from the team is there's been some fantastic partnership done with local boards to date, and we'll carry on together. But we do need to sign off the big documents first. Councillor Hills.
Oh, no.
Councillor Filipaina.
No, a younger one.
Only about a couple of months there. Thank you, Kenny. Just a few, it's probably slight comments, questions. I have concerns just with this. I mean, it's good, and I'm glad we're moving to this way, and obviously you know I'm from Kaipatiki, which has long had all these partnerships in place. I'm just concerned that findings may be too prescriptive across the whole of Auckland. That it needs to be flexible for each maybe area or maybe even local boards, just because I've seen it even on the shore. We have some really, really successful models in the community space, but then say in the sports space, it's probably good on money, but actually some of those groups are crying out for operational funding. Say the netball, where in other areas they get operational funding, so the partnership on the capital is fine, but actually on the shore some of those groups are using those capital funds to just try and fund their operational. So I'm worried that we sort of start. Obviously there's a lot of good work here, but I'm worried that we sort of start with everyone's sort of the same, and then we come up with policy that's sort of the same. So it's just, I want to make sure that we look into what's already been doing really well, and that it's not prescriptive for the whole of Auckland, that the end result.
Through you, Madam Chair. So just to, I suppose, reassure you that what we're looking at doing is coming up with, I suppose, a regional approach, but that within that there would be a great deal of flexibility for individual local boards, for sectors, to actually come up with an approach that fits the situation. One thing we did find when we did this work was that out of the 300 odd partnerships that we identified, you could almost say no two were alike. These arrangements do tend to be very bespoke, and that reflects the fact that every situation will be different kinds of partners with different capability and resources to bring to the table, and local boards have a different level of interest and a different approach to this. So the policy won't be seeking to say from now on they'll all look like this, but it's saying we need some parameters within which to operate that are going to ensure that partners actually get what, have a good experience with council, and also that we're actually entering arrangements that are sound from a financial and risk point of view. So it's more going to be around setting parameters rather than fixed approaches that everybody must follow, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hills. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations. on the first part because I think it's a long time coming. I know that people around this particular table would have had questions galore around the partnerships and the utilisation within the local board areas around our facilities. I'm not going to repeat what Councillor Simpson and Hills have commented on, but I will, however, ask a question in regards to the Māori impact statement and just around marae and the network plan. So would this be going back to the Independent Māori Statutory Board for the information as well? I just didn't hear that through your earlier statement, that's all. Because as you put in here under the impact report, they are part of the network plan and there are facilities within the local board areas that are targeted Māori. So just wanted to sort of ensure that's another group that we need to sort of put through, Chair. Thank you.
Absolutely, yep. We'll make sure that that goes through the Independent Māori Statutory Board. We've also been in conversations recently with policy staff supporting the board, and they're very keen to work with us on this next phase. So we've already started that conversation.
Thanks.
Fantastic. Yeah, because the community, the upsurge of community marae and marae partnerships is to be applauded and encouraged. Mayor Goff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the paper. I think it's a very useful paper. Two questions, really. How much of remedying this is about resources and how much is it about process, doing it better? First question. Second question, I've looked at some of the quotes there that are always quite interesting insights, but can you just throw us an example of how we haven't got the practice right and how we could have improved it? You probably picked up dozens of such examples, but that just might help those of us not with a background in this area to understand the problem better.
Certainly, through the Chair. In terms of your first question, Mr Mayor, around the resources versus doing better, I'd say probably both things are material. We certainly had feedback that the level of resource available for partnerships was sometimes not sufficient to deliver the outcomes that we were expecting. And in terms of the feedback, when we did the walkthroughs in December, the single most common theme of that feedback was around actually setting aside enough resources to do this well. There is sometimes a perception that partnerships will always be cheaper because we're leveraging resources from other places. However, often, there is a significant investment required to do them well. Sometimes there might be more upfront and then tailing off over time. So certainly, I think in terms of the overall amount of resources allocated, that will be something that this council will need to consider how best to resource those versus the facilities that council owns and operates itself. In terms of the versus the process matters, I would say that actually the real opportunity that we found with this work was the opportunity to do the process part better. And to give you some examples to answer your second question of some of the sorts of things that we heard, we found that there was anywhere between 10 and 30 different teams within council that an average partner might have to engage with. And often those different teams, they didn't share data, they weren't having conversations about the various ways that they were in touch with those facilities or those partners, and that meant that sometimes the left hand and the right hand weren't necessarily in alignment, and that seems something that, with a bit of will and intention and good collaboration behind the scenes, we could be doing a far better job of providing a more coordinated council for those partners to actually engage with, rather than multiple different fragmented strands, as is sometimes the case. Another example I could give you was that sometimes we have quite small voluntary organisations getting together who have a passion for a sport or an art form, and they'd really like to get a facility going. They're often very successful at fundraising and bringing others on board with that vision. And council often will come to the party and provide substantial capital investment. But sometimes those organisations, just because they love the activity they want to do in that facility, doesn't necessarily translate to knowing how to design, build and operate a facility. And we need to make sure that when we're entering those sorts of relationships, we're understanding the capacity of that group to do those harder technical bits and making sure that where that is an issue, we're actually walking alongside them far more closely. So that was another theme that came through, that the money is important, but actually the technical expertise that council has to offer, and we do have very, very skilled people in council at all of those things, that we need to be making sure that we don't just hand the money over, but that we actually look at how else we might support them to succeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
Well, just to follow on for Councillor Filipina, the no timeline, unless it's in one of the 11 documents appended to the report, which I haven't seen because they haven't been under separate cover, there's no timeline for the investigation into the relationship with Maori and facility partnerships. So you mention it in the report, but it's not in your timeline that I've got here.
So through the chair, so at the moment what we set out in the report is a high-level timeline for when this policy development work is going to take place. Once we've got the endorsement of the committee, we can proceed to being more detailed in our planning. At the moment, we're looking at working with the Te Waka Hangamua and the Independent Māori Statutory Board to think about how we might approach that, whether it's something that we do as a shorter, intensive piece of work within the overall, or whether it's something that we're going to work on over time is yet to be worked through. But what we've done is really clearly signal that we think this is an area that at the moment needs more work. We want to understand why there haven't been as many facility partnerships taken up by marae, and we want to understand, working with those within the organisation who can advise us, what's the best way to understand that. We have had at the walkthroughs, we did have identified there are 2 or 3 marae who have been in a form of partnership with council, and we'd like to start with those and actually looking at those particular instances. What can we learn, and how else might we understand what's happening? So whether it's going to be a short intense bit or a longer piece over that time frame, it will certainly happen between now and December, but exactly how is still to be worked out.
And so do you have an intention to directly liaise with Mana Whenua?
Yes, if that's what's seen to be appropriate, absolutely, yes.
That's cool. And just on the documents, are they available to the public?
Well, now that they're on an agenda, they are effectively on public record, but I think it... Apologies, Councillor.
But they're not in the addendum agenda.
So all of these, and these are the ones, Councillor, I was saying, you know, D, E, F, G through to K is about 200 pages, and they are A3, is it A3? The big ones. Yeah. And, you know, to be absolutely blunt, the cost of printing all of these out to simply be discarded at the end of the meeting is prohibitive. And as the Environmental Committee of this council, as chair, I take responsibility for the fact that we have not printed and handed out 200 pages worth of documents to everybody. If you wish to print them out, they can do that, and if the community wish to see them, they are on the public agenda.
So where are they on the public agenda? That's what I don't understand.
They're available on the website. Yep. They're downloadable.
It's all there.
I think we need to, I've just been saying to the staff, I think a little bit of a debrief for some of us at the end of this meeting on the availability of information is probably needed, but whatever's on our public agenda is available to the public, as well as all the attachments. So people can go in to our agenda on our website and read these attachments.
So shouldn't there, sorry to do process stuff, but shouldn't there be an addendum agenda of all the attachments, at least one copy at the meeting for anybody who might not have seen them? And
that's what I'm saying. We've had a little chat about that will come up in our debrief. So we might be able to do one, but you know, we are A, looking at the environmental impact of our daily work, and B, the sheer expense of printing, which in this council runs to tens of millions of dollars. It's unseen, unspoken, and it is a complete waste of money. So, any other questions on this? Member Wilcox?
Yes, I'm just interested in your statement in the Maori Impact Statement on number 40, where you have relationships with Māori that involve investment in community facilities other than marae, and sports partnerships. Are these long-standing, or have they just been started? Or I'm just trying to get a hold on these, and whether we're thinking to move further with those as well.
So through the Chair, just to understand your question, Member Wilcox, you're asking which facilities these are and the detail of those relationships, or you're thinking more generally?
Well, I'm thinking more generally is if they're successful, are we thinking to expand that type of partnership?
So through the Chair, this piece of work is essentially trying to learn from some of those arrangements that we already have in place to understand the ones that have been successful, what is it that's made them successful, the ones that have had issues, what might avoid those issues happening in future. So absolutely we would expect to do more partnerships of that type, but it would be with a view to understanding what we've done well and not well in the past so that we can improve our practices in future.
Okay with that? Right, and Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm particularly excited about this piece of work, and I'd like to speak just briefly to those who might have expressed concern about the involvement of local board. Much of the genesis to this work came about under the guidance of Ian Maxwell, when, from a sporting perspective, we were looking at the sustainability of sports. And you may recall members who were either on local boards or part of the former council, there was a region-wide select committee type inquiry where we went out and talked to all of the sporting codes and different organisations to see what we were doing well, what we weren't doing well, and how we could look at sustainability going out. Now, clearly, much of that information, and this was very much elected members, you know, including the Independent Maori Statutory Board, this was elected members led. And the results of that sustainability of sports work, which was very much with the involvement of local boards in a policy sense, this has kind of been through the various guises to actually end up with where we are now, which is talking about a future where we have a much more strategic approach to partnership. Now, I know as part of this, it's going to take many of us out of our comfort zones because we're going to have to actually have some bottom lines, and we are probably going to have to make some decisions that are very difficult. But it is about sending a signal to our communities that we're going to be much more realistic in our expectations. And so I think from my perspective, this is going to force us to grapple with working with the volunteers and working with the sporting codes and everybody else, a much more pragmatic approach to operational expenditure.